What if the content inside the lesson can be different for one student versus another? What if that content can be customized to that student's interests, their background? We think that that will make it way more engaging, and a more engaged student is going to be a better learner.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech podcast. You might be used to joining me on Tuesdays for new episodes, but today I've got a special bonus one for you in partnership with eSpark Learning. If we haven't met before, my name is Monica Burns. I'm a former New York City public school teacher, and I've been out of the classroom for a few years now, leading professional development for educators and writing about all things EdTech on my blog, classtechtips.com. Now, before we jump into today's episode, a quick reminder for you. You can head to my website, classtechtips.com/podcast for all of the show notes and resources from today's episode. And if you're listening to this on a podcast player, maybe it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you'll see a link to the show notes in the description. You can click on it and it'll take you out to all of the resources we mentioned today. This episode is sponsored by eSpark Learning, the playfully personalized online math and reading resource for elementary schools. With thousands of unique, standards-aligned videos, games, and activities to choose from, eSpark will help you spark a love of learning in your classroom. eSpark is offering free access to teachers for the back-to-school season this year. Don't miss your chance to try Choice Texts, eSpark's revolutionary AI-powered approach to student-centered reading. You can try it for free at esparklearning.com. Today's episode is titled How AI Can Personalize Learning in Your Classroom, a bonus episode with eSpark. And today you'll hear from Eric Dahlberg, the CEO of eSpark. If you're curious about AI, what it can do in a classroom setting, then you are in for a treat. Eric shares some of the considerations and the implications for using AI, things you can do today, and some predictions for the future. Let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to chat with you today, not only about personalized learning and personalizing education, but the artificial intelligence or the AI connection to it all. But before we dive in, would love for you to share a bit about your role in education. What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, my name is Eric Dahlberg. I'm the CEO of a company called eSpark Learning. eSpark makes math and reading curriculum for kindergarten through fifth grade. And we aim to be a tool for teachers to better differentiate the education that they're providing to students in their classroom and hopefully do it in a way that the students have a lot of fun along the way.
Well, as a former elementary school teacher and someone who works with lots of folks inside of K-12, I'm really excited to hear your perspective today as we talk about AI and education. There's still a lot of hesitation and uncertainty around AI in general. And how are you working to address some of these concerns from educators and families? I'm sure we're both hearing some similar things in our conversations around this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the concerns and the fears they're understandable. You know, AI sort of burst onto the scene midway through last school year. I think the launch of ChatGPT was around the end of November, and that spawned a news cycle that was pretty profound. And I think for teachers and for educators, that coming right in the middle of the school year was really tough because it was easy to feel sort of reactive. It was easy to feel defensive. Mm-hmm. We all saw, headlines and speculation about, is ChatGPT the end of the high school English essay, for instance? We saw concerns about how it might be used to, cheat on homework assignments, stuff like that. And so I think the way it got introduced in the middle of the school year didn't allow educators to be super thoughtful and proactive about how they might want to use it in their classroom and what the benefits are. Rather, they were just so focused on avoiding the risks and sort of understanding the ways that it might disrupt their classroom practices that perhaps they didn't really want to be disrupted. And so it was natural that we started out that way. But at eSpark, we're seeing a big transition. We saw this later in the school year, and it's really sort of picked up speed over the summer. I think that folks are transitioning from this reactive, defensive, place of fear to be more proactive and more thoughtful in how they might want to use it. And instead of just thinking about the ways to, thwart it, they're thinking about the ways that they can put it to use for them, the ways that it can benefit them. And so certainly at, eSpark, that's what we're trying to enable. We want people to sort of get oriented around the ways that can actually make things better, as opposed to just focus on the ways that it can make things worse. And so I think that's the key. If you're asking about how we're, introducing sort of AI in education, it's to sort of get people aligned and sort of point out the ways that it can be really beneficial, because that's a lot more fun to talk about than the ways that you're worried about it.
Yeah. And, I've heard a lot of the same things in my conversations with with educators around this topic. I was in Kansas City a few weeks ago, earlier this summer. And one of the things I found myself saying was, feel your feelings, right? It's okay if you are holding on to that hesitation and the fear, but also don't ignore, right, all the benefits, like you said, that are here for educators when they are designing instruction for their students and thinking about this upcoming school year and what's possible. So, I'm excited to jump into this idea of AI and its impact on teaching and learning. Could you share with us some specific ways AI can make learning more personalized and more accessible for students?
Yeah, well, I'll start at a super high level, and then I'll give you a real specific example of, a new product that we're really, really proud to launch next week. But at a really high level, the thing that we're excited about is we think that AI has the chance to make a meaningful difference in further personalizing the education that's available to each student. We at eSpark are doing something that a lot of other companies do and have done for 10 years. We are personalizing the sequencing of the lessons that are presented to a student. We call it the adaptive pathway, but this notion that you might have 25 kids in the class and they shouldn't all be working on exactly the same lesson, because some are at this level and some are at this level, and you really want to target that lesson to what they need. That's a concept that's been around a while, whether you call it personalized learning or differentiated learning. It's what eSpark's been doing via our adaptive pathway, and frankly, so have a lot of other companies. But we think AI introduces the possibility to take that personalization a couple of really significant steps further. So one is we want to use AI to personalize the content that is in the lessons themselves. So right now we're personalizing the sequencing of the lessons, the order in which the lessons are, sort of queued up for the student. But what about the actual lesson? What if the content inside the lesson can be different for one student versus another? What if that content can be customized to that student's interests, their background? We think that that will make it way more engaging, and a more engaged student is going to be a better learner. So that's one way. AI can customize the content in the lesson. The other thing that we're excited about and are exploring is the potential for AI to customize the remediation offered to the learner. One of the big advantages of having, a teacher sitting right next to you or a one-on-one tutoring relationship is a human being can tell from a wrong answer that you give oftentimes where you went wrong, and they can remediate the specific instruction to sort of fix that error or whatever you were missing. Online programs, for the most part, have not been very good at doing that. I know we at eSpark, just like a lot of other programs that do something similar, about the best we can do is say, oops, that's not right, try again. Maybe we can prompt them by giving them, letting them look through see the instructional video another time, or sort of reread the instructions. But it's really, really hard to precisely diagnose the mental error they made in that wrong answer and deliver instruction that very, very specifically addresses that error. But we think AI can do that. And so that's the second sort of meaningful advance. So just to sum things up, we're already personalizing the sequence of the lessons. We think AI can help us personalize the content in the lessons and the remediation in the lessons themselves. And that creates a really, really powerful learning experience. So that's super high level.
I love both of those components. I mean, just the idea that you could have something that's going to resonate with a student so much better and really help make that impact for them.
And we think we've got a great example coming August 1st, a great example of those two elements of personalization. We call it choice texts. Choice texts they're basically reading comprehension lessons. for both fiction and nonfiction, for RI and RL, for the educators in the bunch. But this notion that, imagine your good old fashioned reading comprehension lesson. You give a child a reading passage, they read that, and then you ask them questions to assess their comprehension, right? And there's a bunch of different flavors, but that's the basic construct. In the old days of early 2023, I might add, that reading passage that you give the kid is the same reading passage that every kid gets who is working on that particular lesson, right? What if we could customize that reading passage to the student's interests? What if they had some choice, some control? They could exert some agency over what they get to read. We're still working with them on reading comprehension. We're still going to assess their comprehension of that reading passage. But do you think they'll be more interested to read something that they helped create or that they chose? Yeah. We do, and we've got a bunch of early evidence from our testing that they love it as much as we had hoped. So that's going to be our first installment towards this, vision of more personalized curriculum. Like I said, it's launching next week, and we're really excited to get it out there in the wild.
That's so fantastic. And as you're talking, my wheels are just spinning and thinking back to my time, right? Sitting with a group of students, trying really hard to make things resonate with them. And so that they are, they're buying in, right, to this content and to the activity that we're doing. So, you alluded to this earlier, and I know I mentioned it too. Things have been moving really fast in this space, a lot of developments around AI technology. So how have some of these developments that maybe people have heard about before or our understanding is out there, even if they can't name all of them, how has the developments in AI technology helped you to create a tool like choice text?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. So, the big news over the past, it's been 9 months since the launch of ChatGPT, as most of the news has focused around these large language models or generative AI, if you are familiar with those terms. And one of the things that they're really good at is generating text. And we are absolutely using that for choice texts. We're using a large language model in the background to generate a text. It's a custom text. It's a text that has never been generated before and will never be generated again. It's a text that is generated around that student's interests, their prompts. The students get to participate in creating the story. They get to tell us what they want to read about. And we're absolutely using generative AI to do that. But there's been some other exciting developments that we're leveraging as well. Students love illustrations to go alongside their story. And there's been some really cool work done in image generation that we're going to be leveraging for choice text. So not only can you create the story, but we can also support it with an illustration that, once again, never been created before, will probably never be created again, but it's created on the spot for this story that you just created 30 seconds ago. And we think that that's pretty cool. So anyway, there's a couple of examples for choice text, but lots more coming in the future as well.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, again, with my wheels spinning just about what that looks like, right? To put a custom image that goes along with a story that's just right, not just from a level, right, or instructional standpoint, but also from a student interest, right? What are they going to be excited about? What have they shown interest in, as they're diving into these pieces? So, I'd love for, to hear a bit from you. Could you discuss the potential benefits here of incorporating AI and educational tools, choice text obviously being a fantastic example, into the instructional practices of classroom teachers? How can it support different types of learners? And I'm as you're talking, I'm sure teachers will be picturing individual students maybe from this past year, in their mind as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll start with a theme that I've already kind of sprinkled into the conversation so far, but this notion of engagement. I know this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but our job at eSpark is to, help kids gain and develop proficiency in reading and in math. And, that's what they're going to measure on the state tests and all that stuff. But that's not really how I think about our real job. I think about our real job at eSpark as not just helping kids, gain proficiency in reading and math, but helping them to love reading and math. And there's a difference, right? There's a difference between being proficient in it and really loving it. And when I think about, my experience as a reader or as a mathematician, I know one of the things that's been true for me is I love reading stuff that I love reading, but that doesn't mean that I love reading everything.
Yeah.
And so this notion of choice and this notion that we can provide students more choice in what they read and an effort to sort of tap into their interests and get that engagement, I think is really powerful. And at the end of the day, I think it's going to be really hard to get a kid to love reading if you don't let them read the things that they're interested in reading. I know as an adult, I like reading, but I don't like reading everything. There's certain things that I gravitate towards, right? And if you made me read something else all the time, I wouldn't tell you that I love reading. And so, how can we empower students with a little bit more of that choice and discretion and agency and control? And so just this notion that you can really reach all the students in your classroom and cater to their interests, their background in a little bit more precise and profound way than perhaps you've been able to do in the past, I think is really important. This next one is sort of a derivative of that, but one of the things that we've just heard consistently from all the teachers that we've gotten feedback that we've tested this with is they are so excited to get this in front of their reluctant readers. Everyone's got that kid or usually multiple kids in their classroom that they'll just tell you right to your face that they hate reading. There's a lot of things that they would prefer to do than read. And look, it's hard to blame them. They've got video games, they've got YouTube videos, they got lots of alternatives that, I don't feel like I really had when I was their age. And, some of those are, have a little lower cognitive load and a little bit more interest. But it is amazing when we sit those reluctant readers down in front of choice text. It is amazing to watch their eyes light up as their story, gets written for them based on their inputs. And so that ability to kind of reach those reluctant readers is really, really profound. At the end of the day, all this adds up to, differentiation. It's what we're all trying to do as educators. We're trying to provide, the right education to the right student at the right time. And I think this is just another tool to help us do that. But there's one more angle that we're really excited about at eSpark. We're not sort of leading with this in our marketing, but it's a pretty profound concept and one that we're really excited about. Curriculum providers like us, assessment providers, historically have had a tough time creating content, creating assessment questions that are, free of any bias, any sort of underlying assumptions. It's hard to create something without assuming a little bit of background knowledge, for the student. And, this has been in the headlines for years. We're all well aware of this. But I think that AI might be the first credible tool in a long time to help make a meaningful difference there. And we are really excited at eSpark about, for instance, choice text's ability to support a more diverse and inclusive curriculum that we could just never do the old-fashioned way. We could never, if we were having to author, curriculum ourselves by hand and then apply it to the masses, we could never hope to support the variety and diversity of, sort of backgrounds and interests that our students, sit down with. But with AI, we can do it one by one and we can do it on the spot. And so we're really interested in the D&I angle as well, and excited about the advancements that AI can help usher in on that front.
That's such an interesting aspect to highlight. And I think will resonate with so many people who are listening who have that front of mind, who have differentiation goals front of mind. And it's not something that I'm hearing a lot in the conversations around AI and education. So I'm so glad that you brought that up as a way to just think about what's possible if we're generating texts that are just right in all the ways that might mean, right? Just right and supportive of the large variety of students, in every classroom. And, that takes me to this evolution, of the what's next, if you will. And as AI continues to evolve, what does the future look like for education? What role do you envision AI playing in teaching and learning environments like the ones that you've described?
Well, I've spoken a lot about, what I see are some of the benefits. So I won't sort of restate all that, but I'll just kind of cut to the chase and say, well, what does all that add up to? And certainly my hope, over the longer term, and I'm a glasses half full kind of guy, right? But my hope is that, education gets, democratized and gets made more accessible, than is the case today and than it has been in the past. I hope that, this fundamental technology allows, companies like us and others to wield it in, a variety of ways, some of which we're thinking about right now and some of which we haven't even considered. But I'm hopeful that the end product is that we've got quality resources that, because they're, digitally delivered and relatively low cost, it adds up to a more accessible, education for everybody who deserves it. So, not to be too grandiose about it, but and hopefully that doesn't sound naive, but like that's absolutely my, my hope and indeed my expectation is that we can, do right by these kids and provide them this winds up being a tool that gets closer to providing them the education that they really deserve.
And I'm right there with you just in terms of the possibilities here. And, I've talked a lot with educators over the past few months around what instructional planning can look like, what it means to locate really great resources. And this is the sort of thing that addresses a lot of the concerns that I'm hearing from educators about the time, the prep, the having everything ready to go in a way that's going to be, engaging for students. But, just as I'm holding on to some of that same positivity that I know you are. There are people who are still hesitant, right? As we have these conversations, is there any advice you'd give to educators, to administrators who might still be a bit skeptical about the role of AI in education?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces of advice, and one of them is very specific and admittedly self-serving for eSpark, and then one of them is more general. First in the sort of eSpark infomercial realm, I would encourage elementary school teachers to try choice texts.
Yeah.
Go to esparklearning.com, check it out. I think you're going to be impressed with what you see because what you're going to find is a lesson that does not look like, an AI chatbot. It doesn't look like a place that kids are going to get lost or go down some dark corner. You're going to find this kid-friendly application where, yes, there's some AI in the background, but that AI is supported with multiple layers of moderation that makes it safe. It's presented to the student with really, really clear instructional value. It is obvious, what the student is going to get out of it. And, in that sense, I think some of your, sort of fears about where AI is headed and some of the other applications, you just won't, you can squint hard and you still won't see them in choice text because of the way we've sort of presented it and wrapped it in layers of sort of safety and an appropriateness from a pedagogy perspective. So anyway, try choice texts. Beyond that, look, we're recording this towards the end of July, and that means that for the vast majority of teachers in the U.S., it's summer break. The last thing I want to do is assign teachers homework over the summer. So, my advice would be to use AI, but use it for your personal life.
Mm-hmm.
In places where your inclination in the past was to quote unquote Google it, try asking that same question from ChatGPT or from Bing's AI powered sort of version of search. Use it to help you sort of read something that you don't really want to read, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't replace your beach reading, like do that, but something that you feel like you need to read, it's a big, long, dense, article or something like that. Have AI summarize that for you. See if you can put it to work for you. Next time you've got to write something that you don't really want to write, leverage the AI for ideas, for a first draft, for editing, like put it to work for you. Talk to it the same way that we've all had experience sort of being disappointed talking to Alexa or Siri. It's not quite there yet. Boy, I tell you what, if you go talk to ChatGPT using, the ChatGPT app, or you go talk to, Bing using the Bing app, it is a fundamentally different experience. It is vastly improved. So just experiment with it, have fun with it, put it to work for you, use it in your personal life, because I really think that just increased exposure to it, increased familiarity with it, it'll do two things. One, it'll sort of remove some of the FUD, the fear and uncertainty and doubt, right? Because you just got more familiar with it. But two, your brain will start lighting up with ways that you might be able to use it and things you're excited about. So just go kick the tires on it and have fun with it. Put it to work for you.
I love that advice. I was telling someone the other day, write a haiku or a limerick for the birthday card that you have to write, like do something like that, get the novelty of it, embrace that. And you're absolutely right. Your wheels will be spinning with all the classroom applications as you're entering in the upcoming school year. So Eric, this was such a fantastic conversation, unpacking what's possible with AI and personalized learning. And I want to make sure people know where to connect with you, where to learn more about choice text. I'll obviously, of course, put links out in the show notes for anyone listening right now. But if someone's on the go and wants to make that mental note, where can they find you? Where can they learn more about choice texts?
Well, you can find me probably in one of two convenient ways. I would love to connect with you over LinkedIn, but you should also feel free to, send me an email directly, eric.dahlberg@esparklearning.com. I would love to hear from, any teacher, any educator out there. So don't hesitate to reach out to me directly. In terms of eSpark as a company, check us out at esparklearning.com or your social channel of choice. I think we're on pretty much all of them. We'd love to hear from you there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Eric. This was fantastic.
Thanks for having me, Monica.
It was so much fun chatting with Eric today and really thinking about all the ways that AI can impact opportunities we have to personalize learning in classrooms. As I mentioned in our conversation, I taught elementary school for a while, and in that role, finding great passages, boosting student engagement, making sure that reading felt relatable for students was always front of mind. So I really appreciated the conversation that we had today, and I hope you were able to take away some things to bring back to your practice too. So let's make this EdTech easy like we always do with some key points from this episode. Reflect on what your readers need. Explore ways to personalize reading materials. Even try out choice texts. Play around with AI tools to get your wheels spinning. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from today's episode at classtechtips.com/podcast, including all of the ways to connect with the team at eSpark. A big thank you to eSpark, our sponsor for this episode. Don't forget to claim your free account and try the revolutionary new choice texts at esparklearning.com. Experience for yourself how eSpark's playfully personalized approach to learning delivers engagement you can feel and results you can see. That's www.esparklearning.com. If you're listening to today's episode on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or maybe another favorite podcast app, don't forget to hit the follow button. When you follow along with the podcast, each new episode will download for you automatically or maybe auto-magically, depending on your favorite way to think about it. That way, you won't miss a thing. If you have a moment or feeling extra helpful today, please leave a rating or review for the podcast. It helps out not just me, but other educators find an episode like this one when they're on the hunt for some education tips and tricks or some new EdTech resources to explore. Have a great week and check back on Tuesday morning for another new episode of the Easy EdTech podcast.